Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're taking a really deep dive into the fascinating and, let's be honest, wildly misunderstood science behind what actually drives adolescent motivation. If you've ever interacted with a teenager or a young adult and felt like, I don't know, you were speaking entirely different languages, yeah, you're in the right place. We are going to unpack the actual biological and psychological realities of the young brain.
Okay, let's dive into this. There's this recent quote from John Mackey, the former CEO of Whole Foods, and it perfectly captures this incredibly common frustration among adults today. It's that pervasive narrative, right? That the younger generation is lazy, entitled, or just impossible to reach. But here's the totally fascinating part. This isn't some brand new phenomenon. Actually, if you look all the way back to the 3rd century BCE, Aristotle was essentially complaining about the exact same thing. He called young people fickle and vehement. Psychologists actually call this the illusion of moral decline. Basically, every older generation is absolutely convinced the next one is sending society in a handbasket. So this brings us to the central mystery of our explainer. Think about human development for a second. We don't see slacker babies, right? Babies will literally fall down 100 times trying to learn to walk. They just crave learning. They absolutely love the difficulty of it. So, how on earth do those eager, learning-hungry little toddlers transform into these seemingly disengaged young adults? You gotta wonder, are their brains just fundamentally broken during puberty, or is it our approach that's failing them?
To understand where this friction comes from, we have to look at something called the mentor's dilemma. And man, this is a universal trap. It's faced by everyone, from brilliant surgeons trying to train medical residents, to law partners critiquing junior associates, straight down to parents just trying to guide their kids. When you need to give critical feedback to someone younger, you almost always feel forced into two terrible choices. Option A, you can be tough and critical, be the hammer, which often just crushes their spirit and makes them feel totally inadequate. Or option B, you can offer the dreaded compliment sandwich, the gift box. It's kind, it's friendly, but ultimately, it's dishonest and super unhelpful because you're just sugarcoating the truth.
Let's move to and see how this builds, because to actually solve the mentor's dilemma, we need to look inside the adolescent brain and understand the hidden neurobiology of puberty. When puberty hits, bam, there's a massive spike in testosterone for both boys and girls. And this hormonal surge radically changes exactly what the brain is paying attention to. Because of those intense hormonal changes, we get what developmental scientists call the socially sensitized brain. The nucleus accumbens, which is a key reward center in the brain, becomes just hyper-attuned to peer evaluation. What this means is that adolescents develop an intense, deeply felt fear of social pain, public humiliation, and shame. But simultaneously, they develop this absolutely unprecedented craving for social reward, pride, and respect. Suddenly, everyday actions like raising a hand in class or, holding a crush's hand for the first time, they aren't just simple actions anymore. No, they are terrifying, high-stakes events where their entire social standing feels like it's completely on the line. And you know what? This beautifully explains the data we see on adolescent risk-taking. Risk-taking peaks right in mid-puberty, completely in sync with those hormonal spikes. But here is the absolutely critical shift in how we need to view this. Adolescent risk-taking isn't just some neurobiological idiocy, okay? They haven't had a puberty-induced frontal lobotomy. Instead, they are actively redirecting their cognitive resources toward whatever is perceived as socially valuable in their peer group. They're taking risks to figure out how to be socially successful and independent. And that intense desire for independence leads right into our next major hurdle, the generational respect gap. Biologically speaking, a 7th or 8th grader starts feeling really ready for autonomy, rights, and a voice. They desperately want to be taken seriously as independent contributors. But culturally? Well, we adults tend to withhold that true autonomy until young people reach their mid-20s. So this creates a massive, decade-long predicament where young people are just starving for respect, but they feel like they're being treated like little kids. Which of course leads adults right into the trap of grownsplaining. Because we look at young people taking risks and obviously lacking life experience, we well-intentioned adults start acting like young brains are just completely deficient. We lecture them. We tell them exactly what to do, assuming we obviously know best. But because adolescents are so incredibly sensitive to status and respect right now, this hyper-directive grownsplaining, it spectacularly misfires. Every single time. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly why it misfires. Researchers literally put teenagers into an MRI machine and played them a recording of their own mother nagging them, starting with the classic phrase, "One thing that bothers me about you is." The brain scans were mind-blowing. The The teenager's affective network, the part that processes anger, totally lit up. But more importantly, the cognitive control network, the exact part of the brain you use for planning and changing behavior, actually powered down. And their social cognition, their ability to read the adult's intentions, entirely shut down. So grownsplaining literally turns off the exact parts of the brain required to listen and improve. Crazy, right? To see just how easily we can fix this, look at this hilarious but honestly profound study on medication adherence. They used Vegemite, that incredibly bitter Australian yeast spread. So young adults were asked to eat a massive spoonful of it. When researchers used grownsplaining, basically demanding compliance and telling them what they should do, adherence was terribly low. But when they used respectful phrasing, explaining the science, granting them autonomy, and just asking them to do their part, compliance absolutely skyrocketed. And remarkably, this respectful approach was the most effective on the young adults who had the highest testosterone levels. Their hormonally sensitized brains were completely dialed in to how much respect they were being shown. So if we know that respect basically opens the brain for business, how do we solve the mentor's dilemma when we absolutely have to give tough, critical feedback? The answer is to ditch the compliment sandwich entirely and use a scientifically backed tool called wise feedback. Here's how it works. In a massive study, teachers gave middle schoolers critical feedback on their essays, but they attached a single handwritten Post-it note to the front that read, "I'm giving you these comments because I have high standards and I know that you can meet them." I mean, really think about what that one sentence does. It appeals to a high standard, but it immediately assures the young person that they are fully capable of reaching it. It basically answers the deepest, most existential question an adolescent has, which is, does this powerful person actually believe in me and my future? So the crucial point is that that single sentence literally doubled the rate at which students chose to revise their essays. 2 times the motivation, just by framing the feedback through a lens of respect rather than control. And furthermore, this simple intervention dramatically reduced achievement gaps between white and black students. Why? Because it built this solid bubble of trust where the student knew the criticism was meant to help them grow, not to label them.
But obviously, we can't just run around handing out Post-it notes and expect miracles, right? The magic isn't in the paper itself. It's in the underlying philosophy. World-class educators, we're talking MacArthur genius calculus professors, elite NBA shooting coaches, they all systematically motivate young people without crushing their spirits by cultivating what is known as the mentor mindset.
The mentor mindset is defined as aligning your words and actions with someone's long-term well-being. And you do this by maintaining exceptionally high standards alongside continuous, high support. It's coming to the realization that when work gets difficult, a young person's first thought is almost always, wow, I'm the only one struggling here. Therefore, I must be inadequate. By pairing immense challenge with unwavering, highly visible support, a mentor actively prevents that toxic shame from ever taking root. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is seeing what happens if you don't intentionally adopt the mentor mindset. You usually fall into one of 2 extremes. First, you might become the enforcer, maintaining brutal standards with absolutely zero support, which, let's face it, just burns young people out and breeds a ton of resentment. Or, on the flip side, you become the protector, lowering your standards just to protect their feelings. But the real problem with being a protector is that you actually rob the young person of the chance to achieve something genuinely prestigious and build real earned confidence.
The science here is incredibly clear. Young people aren't broken, they aren't totally unmotivated, and they definitely aren't purposefully ignoring us just to drive us crazy. They are navigating this intense biological awakening that makes them desperately crave status, respect, and independence. When we grownsplain, their brains literally shut down. But when we offer high standards perfectly paired with high support, they are capable of truly astonishing things. So, as you look at the young people in your own life, whether you manage them at work, coach them on a field, or parent them at home, the question is really yours to answer. Will you be an enforcer, a protector, or a true mentor to the next generation?